In the summer of 1999, two children were playing at home. However, this fun playdate took a deadly turn that no one saw coming. This is the tragic case of Tiffany Eunick. Make sure to watch till the end so you don't miss any of the chilling details. On July 28, 1999, Deweese Eunick Paul had some errands to take care of and needed someone to babysit her daughter Tiffany. Deweese reached out to her friend Kathleen Tate to find out if she'd be able to watch Tiffany for the evening. Kathleen agreed, which must have been a huge relief to Deweese. As a parent, it can sometimes be difficult to find someone to babysit your child last minute. However, it is amazing when you not only find someone who is willing and available, but is also trustworthy. This was the case for Deweese and Kathleen. They had both grown up together on the island of Jamaica before moving to the state of Florida. They were close friends, so it made sense that Deweese trusted Kathleen to look after Tiffany. However, that night, something horrible would take place that would change the nature of their relationship forever. Kathleen picked up Tiffany from her house on July 28, 1999. Deweese thought that Tiffany would enjoy being at Kathleen's house because Kathleen also had a young son that Tiffany had played with previously. Kathleen's son Lionel was 12 years old and Tiffany was only 6 at the time. But despite their age difference, their mothers assumed they could keep each other company, as they were both still children after all. As Tiffany was leaving, her mother said goodbye to her. Little did she know that it was the last time she would ever see her little girl again. After picking up Tiffany, Kathleen took the kids shopping and then back to her home in Pembroke Park, Florida. When they got back to the house, Kathleen made some dinner for the kids. Lionel and Tiffany had their dinner and decided to watch a little TV when they were finished eating. Kathleen was a war veteran who was currently working as a highway patrol trooper. She was scheduled to work an overnight shift that night and was tired from everything they had done earlier that day. She wanted to take a quick nap before her shift, so she went upstairs to lay down. Kathleen left Tiffany and Lionel downstairs quietly watching TV by themselves. However, the evening would soon take an unexpected turn that would end in tragedy. While Kathleen was taking a nap upstairs, she was woken up by noise coming from downstairs. At about 10 p.m., she yelled at the kids for them to quiet down, but didn't check on them. Lionel yelled back and told his mother that Tiffany was the one causing the commotion. Kathleen believed him and even said she would, quote unquote, beat her butt if Tiffany didn't stop making noise. After this, Kathleen assumed everything was fine and went back to bed. But roughly 40 minutes later, Lionel ran upstairs to tell his mother that Tiffany had stopped breathing. Kathleen jumped out of bed and ran downstairs to see what had happened to Tiffany. She called 911 and started administering CPR in the hopes of reviving Tiffany. She performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, but it was of no use. They didn't know it at the time, but little Tiffany was already gone. What could have caused this 6-year-old's death? How did an innocent playdate between two children turn deadly? According to Lionel, he was simply wrestling with Tiffany and she hurt herself. He told his mother that he had Tiffany in a headlock when she hit her head on the side of a table. He then said she started rolling around on the floor, crying, acting like a baby, and urinating in her pants. After witnessing all this and seeing Tiffany writhing around in pain, Lionel did not get up and call his mother immediately. He casually went back to watching TV like nothing had happened. When he finally went to get his mother to tell her that Tiffany wasn't breathing, her poor little body was already cold. Why did Lionel think it was a good idea to play with Tiffany in this way? He was twice her age, 3 times her size, and 3 times her weight. Tiffany didn't stand a chance against Lionel, but did he understand this? Was he just a naive child copying wrestling moves he had seen on TV without knowing how dangerous they were? Or was this a violent child who intentionally tried to harm this little girl? Tiffany's autopsy records would eventually reveal the gruesome way in which she died. According to Tiffany's autopsy report, she suffered 35 injuries: a cracked skull, a broken rib, a lacerated liver, hemorrhaged kidneys, bleeding in her brain, and dozens of bruises on other parts of her body. During the trial, a child abuse expert would later testify that this disturbing act of violence lasted for nearly 5 minutes and resulted in injuries that are similar to those caused by falling from a 3-story building. It was believed that some of Tiffany's bruises were likely caused by Lionel stomping on her while she laid on a flat surface. What was his reason for inflicting such unimaginable pain on this defenseless little girl? In 2001, Lionel was put on trial for Tiffany's death. During the trial, prosecutor Ken Padowitz would reveal the supposed motive for Lionel's horrifying behavior that night. According to the prosecutor, Lionel wanted to get rid of Tiffany because he had a crush on her mother, Deweese. Tiffany's mother testified that when she told Lionel that her daughter was dead, he shrugged and rolled his eyes. She even told the court that the next day, Lionel asked if he could live with her and have Tiffany's toys. This detail is very important because it shows just how disturbed Lionel Tate really was. He thought it was okay to ask these questions to this grieving woman after what he had done to her daughter just days before. Had something snapped in Lionel, or had he always been this way? It turns out that Lionel had a previous history of causing trouble. Prior to the murder, he had been suspended from school 15 times. He also displayed other behavioral problems like lying, stealing, and fighting. Should Kathleen have paid closer attention to her son's behavioral issues? Was she partly to blame for leaving the kids unattended when she knew Lionel had violent tendencies? One thing is for certain: Lionel deserved to be punished for what he had done to Tiffany, and this is exactly what happened. After 2 weeks of deliberation, the jury found Lionel guilty of first-degree felony murder. He received a mandatory life sentence without the chance of parole. Although Lionel was tried as an adult, he was only 14 years old at the time of his sentencing. This made him the youngest person to receive a life sentence in the United States. After hearing his sentence, Lionel surprisingly shed a tear as he prepared to be handcuffed and let out of the courtroom. After his conviction, several people thought that he deserved some leniency. Even the lawyers who prosecuted him in court said his sentence was too harsh. 2 years after being imprisoned, an appeals court threw out Lionel's conviction because he wasn't given a mental competency hearing prior to his trial. This time around, he pled guilty to second-degree murder instead, and the state chose not to retry him. They credited him for the years he had already spent in a juvenile detention center and added a few conditions to his deal. He received a year of house arrest, 10 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. In January of 2004, Lionel walked out of jail a free man, but not entirely free because he still had to wear an ankle bracelet. Despite being given a second chance, he just couldn't keep himself out of trouble. A few months later, police found Lionel outside his home with a knife, which was a violation of his parole. In 2005, he was involved in a robbery where he pointed a gun at a pizza man. He was charged with armed robbery, armed burglary with battery, and violating his parole. In 2006, he pled guilty to gun possession and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. It is unfortunate that Lionel wasn't able to turn his life around and couldn't escape the world of crime. However, the fact remains that he carried out a cruel and violent attack on a helpless little girl. Her body was severely bruised and she suffered extensively before she died. Tiffany's mother, Deweese, unfortunately has to live with the heartbreaking reality that her daughter will never come back. But she hopes that one day, Lionel will take responsibility for what he did to Tiffany and admit that it wasn't an accident. If you have a strange or disturbing incident that you'd like us to cover, send us an email at veryweirdish@gmail.com and let us know what you think about the case of Tiffany Eunick in the comments below. If you made it to the end of this video, that can only mean one thing. You are seriously into some weird-ish. So go ahead and press that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more weird content just like this.